Hello and welcome to another APH's Access Academy. We're happy to have you all joining us today. My name is Jeff Schwartz. I'm the outreach specialist for the Southeast region. Today's webinar is the last of the three-part installment series on the road to code. This one is number 3. We'll be talking about CodeJumper today. Today, we'll be hearing from my colleague, Leslie Weilbacher, APH's outreach specialist for the Northwest. Additionally, we're excited to bring you Jason Martin, one of our assistive technology trainers from our regional centers for assistive technology training at AIDB, which is the Alabama Institute for the Deaf and Blind. He'll be sharing some exciting experiences he's had working with code students on the CodeJumper recently. I'd like to inform everyone that handouts for today's webinar can be found on the APH Access Academy webpage.
Great. Thank you so much, Jeff. Welcome, everyone. Yay to the Northwest for a good showing. I am out here in Washington State. I'm Leslie Weilbacher. I'm the outreach specialist for the Northwest region. So that is a big chunk of the US. I have been a TVI O&M. I have a big interest in assistive technology, and I really have gotten into this coding thing. And I'm very excited to have Jason here with me today. Jason, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, Leslie. I'm Jason Martin. I'm an assistive technology trainer for the Center of Assistive Technology Training, or the CATT program. And we cover the Southeast region, and I've been doing assistive technology for about 12 years professionally. So I'm really excited that this is my first APH webinar.
Okay, and we have a lot to get through today, so I will try to move quickly because I want Jason to tell us about his week of teaching CodeJumper with a bunch of students. So let's jump into our objectives. Number 1 is understand the relationship between the physical components and screen-based block coding. 2 is build vocabulary for coding concepts such as processing, command, computer program, parameter, and of course, computer. 3 is practice the language of computers by writing a line of code that produces a song or story. And you will get to watch some students work through that process. Okay, so why learn coding foundational skills? Only 29.5% of adults with visual impairments are employed in the US. So there's a need there. There is 2 times faster growth of jobs in the CS field. So there's a big need for people to fill those jobs. 2.5% of undergraduate degrees are in computer science related fields. That's not enough to reach that gap that is forming with this fast job growth. 50% of top paying jobs in the US require some understanding of coding. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're coders or programmers, but that does mean that they need to understand what coding is, how it works, what uses it, maybe even have a level of coding knowledge for HTML to do some website manipulation. So this is obviously a big need, and obviously a need for people with visual impairments to help fill some of these gaps. But how do we do that? We have to teach coding. So we start with the foundations. And this is all from, these statistics are from Burning Glass Technologies from 2016. This was taken from the Microsoft training page. So,
Leslie, I'll apologize. I had some technical issues with the slide deck. Would you like to launch the poll? Would you like to keep moving forward?
Let's go ahead and do that now. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay, so I'm going ahead and launching, oops, my bad. Sorry about that. My apologies.
I jumped right into statistics, and I forgot to ask people how are they feeling about all of this today.
So our poll question, yeah, it was just a basic question. What is your comfort level with coding and coding concepts? Are you excited but don't know where to start? Interested but a little overwhelmed? Very comfortable and ready to go? Or perhaps not comfortable, but want to support an interested student?
And if you find the poll dialogue difficult to manage, try just dropping it into the chat, because I would like to know. I understand that there's a lot of concern around coding in general and teaching it if you don't feel like you know it yourself.
And Leslie, to chime in here off to the side, I agree. Like, that's one of the first questions I ask my groups.
Awesome.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll so for time, and go ahead and share out the results. We have 33% of respondents saying they're very comfortable and ready to go, which is fantastic. We have a tie with excited and interested at 27%. And we have about 13% of folks saying they're not comfortable, but they're really interested in learning more about how to help their students. So that's fantastic. We love to hear that.
You are in the right place. Excellent. Okay. So now I've gotten our feet wet with some statistics on why this is important. Let's talk about what we are actually here to hear about. So what is CodeJumper? This was a collaboration between Microsoft and the American Printing House for the Blind. It is block coding, which we will dive into more, but it's a tangible block coding. It is physical components that also then show up on the screen. So we get a bridge for the very needed tactile elements. That's a great teaching tool for our students, but they get that bridge to the screen of where a lot of that coding really happens. And what's great about this is kinesthetic learners can be anyone. I know a STEM teacher in an elementary school. She only has 2 students with visual impairments, but she has a CodeJumper and she uses it for all of her students because she feels it gets a lot of the concepts across to her students better than some of the other methods she has. So universally designed, yay. Quickly to talk about some setup, I suggest you can watch the unboxing video that Jason made, and we will drop that link into the chat. When you first open the box, it's a little scary. There's a lot of pieces, but it's actually, once you get your hands on it, not as scary as you might originally think. You'll want to download the app on your preferred device. Right now, we have it for a Windows computer or an Android tablet. We're working on an iPad version, but so stay tuned. You want to connect the hub, which is the biggest component, to Bluetooth. So it's connected to your device. And you will select a sound set, and we will talk a little bit more about that as well. But you get to choose what sounds you want it to produce. And you can also add your own sounds. When you plug in your first pod, you will hear a very audible click sound, and that means that it's connected, but it's also recognized. And that is the basic setup. So on this road, with the app, you can download it from the Microsoft Store or the Google Play Store. It is visible, accessible block coding on your screen. You can add your own sounds. Like I said, Jason, I know, likes to add sound effects from Star Wars, which is fun. And with JAWS or NVDA, it is fully accessible. You use your arrow keys and tab key to navigate the screen. You have 4 threads of code that are visible, and that corresponds to each port on the side of the hub itself. And using TalkBack with an Android tablet, or actually the Matt Connect tablet, this also works on. You use your flick and tap gestures, but you have one thread that is visible. So the road. This has been a journey. We started back in February talking about CodeQuest, and the main things about CodeQuest that you could get were a grid format, building your voiceover skills, and you get an element of this block coding because there's buttons in the app that you tap that add a line of code. Our next stop on the journey was Code and Go Mouse. And that was more of a 3D, it was 3D, more free form. Also block coding in the terms of pressing buttons on the mouse's back. And now we come to Code Jumper. Now this has a tactile and on-screen element that bridges the two. You can go very basic to advanced. And the block coding comes out of turning the dials on the pods. So each turn of the dial tells the computer a different line of code. So I keep talking about block coding, and I want to explain the difference and why we do block coding versus just doing the stereotypical person sitting in the dark typing like mad on their keyboard. Block coding is the simplified way that we start usually with children. And actually, I find it a lot easier too. We have these colorful pieces of blocks on the screen that hold the code. And the code is a string of characters, numbers, in a certain way that gives the computer information. It's the language the computer speaks. On this left side of the screen, we have a screenshot of the Code Jumper app where it reads begin thread, or thread 1, explosion, play in another color below that, play, oh no, at 1 time speed, and then below that says in thread. So that gives us a little bit of information. We have a few words, but hidden behind those colorful blocks is more information. And what that would look like if we strip those blocks away is on the right side of the screen. And I'm not going to vouch for how accurate this is. I made a reasonable guess, but this is using the language C++. And it starts number sign, include, greater than sign, IO stream, less than sign. Then we go down a line. It says int, int, main, open parentheses, close parentheses. Then we go down a line. Left curly brace. Then we go down a line. And indent, std, colon, count, less than, left quote, oh no, exclamation mark, backslash, in, greater than sign, down a line, curly bracket, right curly bracket. So we have a lot of little extra pieces that are necessary, but are hard to understand for a beginner. So we cover those up with those colorful blocks of text. Whew. Okay, moving on. I'm going to recap some vocabulary because you're going to hear it and I want you to have it fresh in your brains. From CodeQuest, we had sequence, putting steps in an order, first, second, third, last. Debug, finding an error and fixing it. It didn't work. Why? How do we fix it? Loop, an action that is repeated. You're repeating the same, you're repeating the same action of stepping until you reach your destination. Next, we have the vocabulary from Code and Go Mouse. We talked about algorithm, which was a sequence of commands. Input, the signals or instructions sent to a computer. Store, holding on to information to be used at a later time. Output, data or information that is created by a computer. Now our new vocabulary, and I gave us a lot of new vocabulary. We've processing, changing information into a useful format. So when we would press the button on the back of Code and Go Mouse, it would take that input, hold on to it, store it, and then change it to output it as movement. Command, so that's the instruction for the computer. Computer program, many commands and algorithms put together to make a computer program. So we've got the smallest is a command. We've got a couple commands in the right sequence that makes up an algorithm. We've got a bunch of algorithms that makes up a computer program. Parameter, a value that is given to a command. So for example, what note to play, how fast to go. At a computer, what is a computer? It is an electronic device for receiving input, storing information, processing information, and outputting information. And now we get to have some fun and hear from Jason on his experience teaching CodeJumper.
Thanks,
Take it
Leslie.
away, Jason.
That was cool. Great recap, because a lot of the definitions and vocabulary were things that we immediately covered at the Alabama School for the Blind. So let me tell you a little bit about the project before we roll into kind of their lessons, because that's what you're going to see is the lessons used for the students for at least 4 days of CodeJumper. The event was held with the Center of Assistive Technology Training. I taught 25 students from the Alabama School for the Blind that were in grades 6th through 8th. And so I asked the question, I said, hey, I want to bring CodeJumper to your school. And they said, well, all right, how many kids do you want? And I made the mistake and said, how many you got? And so I got 25 VI kids to work with CodeJumper. But I was excited because I wanted, as a TVI, I wanted to be able to look at students and see in the real world how they interact with CodeJumper. So telling you about it is one thing, and working with CodeJumper is another thing as a professional, but seeing students work with it is a whole different story. So I've got a couple of videos to show you today, but I want to start by showing you some of our first lessons. And naturally, when I presented the lessons, it would have been strange to have pictures of the students, but that would have been really meta. So these were just a couple of graphics that were filled in, but here I have 2 students working with CodeJumper. And the first thing we cover in the CodeJumper lessons was that computers need to do 4 tasks. Computers need to be able to take in information as input. This may sound familiar to you. Computers need to store that information. Computers need to process that information. And computers need to output that information. So before I go any further, on codejumper.com, there's a link to resources, and there's pretty much anything you need to know about CodeJumper is on that website. So within that, there's a curriculum for CodeJumper that covers the majority of these first 4 lessons, and codejumper.com has been linked in the chat. Thank you. So these lessons were, I adapted them from CodeJumper's lessons and the lessons that were developed between CodeJumper and APH. And they're great lessons in the fact that they're structured in this way. They have an unplugged activity where students get to do something a little out of the box that doesn't involve CodeJumper, it doesn't involve computing. They think about the concepts, and then they come back and take these concepts and they have a guided activity with CodeJumper, and then generally they have another activity that they are able to explore with. And so this first question of computers need to do 4 tasks, this was an exploratory activity that started with, well, what are tools and what do tools do? And when the students had this, they were able to think, and I've had a friend from the Ohio School for the Blind that's worked with CodeJumper, and we've both come to this conclusion with students that when they think about input, storing, processing, and output, students at Schools for the Blind automatically associate it with a Braille writer. And I think that's kind of cool, that how does a person input Braille? Where is that Braille knowledge stored? What's the processor when using a Braille writer? And what's the output? So I think that's already just a cool analogy with that I've observed with these students. So again, generally there's a guided activity. And in this first video that you're going to see, the guided activity is simply plugging in a play pod into CodeJumper and seeing what it does. And we're using animals. And again, you could imagine with 25 students, it's a cacophony of noise. So before we play the video, I'm going to kind of describe what goes on, but it's in a classroom. There's a number of kids, and I just really want to show you in the live classroom what CodeJumper looks like. And so before we play, I want to just mention that each of these videos is kind of introduced with a student. They're not named in the video, so I'm not going to name them. But the student just gives their opinion of CodeJumper or whatever activity that we did that day. There is a video towards the end that you're going to swear I paid the student. I didn't, but it's kind of awesome footage just to hear this is how they felt after a week of working with CodeJumper. So again, it's an interview. What you're going to see is a question about tools and about what is a computer. And then what you're going to see is kind of a line of students working with different animal sounds. And again, the pig noise is something to behold. So go ahead. And I'm going to chime in periodically, but again, it is in a classroom. It is loud video. So I will try to describe as much as humanly possible. And it's ASB Road to Code. This is day 1.
Yeah, first, CodeJumper was the first program class I had. I'm interested in STEM. Most reason why is because I want to learn how scripting does and like basically everything you have to put into it, the proper things, proper commands and everything like that. I like learning about that.
Somebody tell me what's a computer used for? Just one thing. You. Emails. Yes, sir.
It helps you with texting and calling.
So texting, calling's 2 things. You're fired.
Yes. Oh no, yes. No, don't.
Yeah,
Looking stuff up on the internet.
You get stuff up?
well, dang, I was gonna say searching for your test scores.
Yeah.
Searching for your test scores, yeah.
Yeah.
The hub is
Yeah.
going through pod number 1, pod number 2, pod number 3, and pod number 4.
It's giving signal, but it's charged by a battery.
So it's going in a string. So for those of you who've got it plugged in, listen to me. For those of you who've got it plugged in, one into every port that's on the side of it, you're hearing the sounds at the same time. For these in a string, you're hearing them one at a time.
Yeah.
So during this part of it, It's really their exploratory process where they're twisting the knobs, they're figuring out what this thing does, and you're not giving them the entire box, just a very limited.
What do the two knobs do?
One of them changes the noises and one of them changes the pitch.
So it's the speed, really. And the speed is what's changing the pitch.
Yes.
So it's really just speeding it up.
So again, I know it's loud, but that first lesson is very simple. What does a computer do? What are the 4 things it needs to do? And can we get this to make a noise? And that's relatively it. What do these knobs do? And they were able to identify this. Let's go back to the slides.
Now, Jason, what happens if there's an error? What sound do we get?
We get, I believe it's a burp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like a burp and kids love it.
Yeah, it's a great thing. Well, in doing this live, I think it's kind of funny that one of the takeaways that I found, and I said this in the Changemakers podcast, was that kids found the word hub to be hilarious and pod. So you're describing all of the parts of CodeJumper at first to them, and that's what you don't see in the video. But those 2 words were just hilarious. I still have yet to learn why. And so this is a shot on screen of just kids diving into it, and they start to put in more than one play pod to make more than one animal string. And they're just making that kind of observation. And one thing that I love about CodeJumper is that it is a physical device, but it's also a computer science curriculum. So like 2 things go hand in hand. The curriculum they've developed really leads to these activities. And so the student shouldn't be given the entire box and just go. It needs to be structured, and then the student really starts to learn how to use the CodeJumper. So this was reiterating, and we can move quickly through this, that CodeJumper is a computer. So CodeJumper is a computer, and I ask the students, what's the input? CodeJumper takes the information as input in the form of sound data files, sounds that are on the app for CodeJumper, settings on the dials, and pushes of buttons. I ask the students, what is stored with CodeJumper? So we take this idea of, again, a Braille writer or anything else, like even an MP3 player, and then we take it to CodeJumper after they've made animal sounds with it. So CodeJumper stores information in the form of sounds that can be played. And again, continuing with the conversation, how does CodeJumper process? And you ask the students, as CodeJumper processes information by following the commands of pods as arranged. It also processes in a way that if it outputs, that it can output and modify the sounds. And how does it output? I love this question because it's like the sound and, you know, the Captain Obvious question, but it outputs information in the form of sounds it produces. So Leslie talked at length with Coding Go Mouse and the algorithm of doing things in a step-by-step process. And Coding Go Mouse is, you know, an early age tool to be used to kind of explore that concept. And so CodeJumper takes this natural step of, well, what is an algorithm? And in the curriculum, the students are asked, waking up in the morning. What is the algorithm? If our algorithm problem is waking up in the morning, what are the steps that we do to wake up in the morning? And students like this one, but they wake up, they brush their teeth, they get dressed, comb their hair, and they'll tell you a million different things. And it's kind of fun to eat breakfast. And it's fun to rearrange these things and demonstrate, well, where would your algorithm run into a problem if you take the bus before you get dressed? And of course, giggles all around. But and this was one that suggested, I really like it, but I kind of like to kick it up a notch. And I've got an activity that explores an algorithm and what an algorithm is in an unplugged way that you're going to see in the video in a second. So again, with this concept of algorithms is we're working on a sequence, a set of instruction that does something, and we need to know what commands that can be carried out one at a time in the order that they appear. So students need to really understand those two concepts. Then in this, and this is day 2 and 3, we covered these concepts. So parameters. When we talk about parameters, they kind of start to explore this idea, but what are the parameters of a program that they've created? A very basic program, sound and duration. So we ask them, well, what is a parameter, and go over that topic. And in computer science, it's a value that's given as an instruction or a command. So do I play something at volume 2, or do I play something at volume 10? Or how fast do I play something? And then what is a sound set? And the word sound set is not, it's a very important term for CodeJumper. And in CodeJumper, you can have a category and say animals or Beethoven. And in that category, you have 8 sound bites that are related to whatever that is. So in the case of animals, 8 related animal sounds, and Beethoven, 8 pieces of, and I'm going to get this wrong when I say it, but I believe it's Beethoven's 5th symphony. Leslie, if I'm right or wrong, let me know. So anyway, and those sound sets can be customizable. And that's one of my favorite things to do, is to add in whatever's relative at the time. You can create sound scenes with like carnival sounds or popcorn or racing. And again, Leslie said, I like to use Star Wars. I love Star Wars and I love SpongeBob, because when we talk about a sequence, if our algorithm is SpongeBob and we talk about a sequence, what student on the planet almost doesn't know the order of the SpongeBob SquarePants theme song? And so they can automatically take CodeJumper and do that. So one person can do that. So the activity that I like to do when we explore this, and this came from a good friend of mine, is the dancing machine. And I give students, basically our algorithm is the dancing machine and it's made to dance. And I give each student a set of instructions. And on the first playthrough of this in the video, you're going to see that we run the machine, and each student, I'm behind them saying you, or I'm tapping the back of their chair, and they're doing a different command in the sequence. So a different, or at first they're all doing the same twist command in a sequence. And then the video moves to me changing those commands up, where some students are doing all the single ladies, and which is a Beyonce move, or some are doing the Matrix or Raise the Roof or air guitar. So it just kind of moves along, and the activity is learning what a sequence is. We also took Code and Go Mouse, which you think probably wouldn't be age appropriate for 6th, 7th, or 8th graders, but it was an amazing activity to do with them. They loved it, and it reinforced this idea of sequencing. And I think the video really shows how much they enjoyed using Code and Go Mouse. So I was surprised and pleasantly pleased. So that's what you're going to see in this lesson. And you're also going to see towards the end them working with different sound sets and parameters. And this is ASB Road to Code, day 2.
I want to be a engineer, and because I like putting things together and fixing them. Probably the mouse one, because it was more like colorful and cartoon, like you're, because it feels when you're playing with the learning with those, you basically, I feel like you're just playing, but you're also learning, because they're making it fun to the point the kid does, me, that knows that I'm doing something fun, but I'm also learning.
Okay.
Not really.
Are we ready?
Grammarly.
This is the start of the dancing. We were doing the twist.
Go. Go. You gotta get excited. Go. 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 Yeah. Go.
So again, we reinforce the algorithm,
Kick us off.
the dancing machine, and we can change the commands in the sequence. So they change moves. Simulating,
You.
raising the roof,
Raising that roof. Give us
raising
some
the roof
love.
again.
You.
Basically,
You.
simulating.
You.
Robot as well. Again, cool job because it is a classroom. It's an amazing shot of all these students putting together the graphs and coding their math.
Okay. So you should have the green squares out.
Yes.
And you should have the bag of. Is it so difficult your mind's exploding? No? All right, do me this favor. So you got the same straight line. Take your mouse and turn the nose facing away from the cheese. Now do it. Program the mouse to get the
Constructed a
cheese,
maze
but
with
its nose
putting a mouse,
has to
and
be away
instead
from
of
it.
it going in a straight
Now do
line,
it.
mouse to the in reverse. In effect, the commands are different, and the mouse has to turn around to get to the cheese. And then once you see the programmer that first time, you just air punch the air with excitement.
You gotta clear them out.
Wait, it's a magnet.
Guys, to clear it out, hit the yellow button every time, okay?
I never tried
The yellow circle.
because I'm trying to learn how to program two
The more complex activities, like building a maze with a different parameter.
I use it can make hot a lot more. Thank
I'll get mine this better. Hey! I just twisted the number 8 times and it didn't. What? I just twisted the number 8 times and it didn't.
Wait.
Listen, I can make it do an up
Do it
and
again.
down.
Okay. Now, which one?
Why you blushing? Well, I seen it sounds like this woman she's trying to sing.
Okay, I think we got it.
I don't know this one, so I can't.
So, and again, it is a very noisy classroom, and I understand the sound behind the video. If you didn't notice in the last shot, it's an example of them. In the last few shots was an example of them taking a sequence and doing basically a piano scale with it. And so we took the idea of the dancing machine and then took it with the idea of doing on Code Jumper a piano scale up and down. And again, this is where the idea of Star Wars comes in. Can you put the Star Wars sequence in order? So the dancing machine is one of my favorite activities, and I think it's really a hit with some classes and maybe some not so much. And I have to stress this, that this is a big group of students with like 25 students. These activities, a lot of them can be scaled down. You do not need that many students. And definitely the concepts can still be covered one-on-one. I dare say it's a lot easier to cover this with a student one-on-one. And And the sequence, Leslie, you know, sequencing activity with Code and Go Mouse, you trained a whole, you had a whole previous training with Code and Go Mouse. Did you think it would work with students of like higher age groups?
I definitely did. I mean, so Diane Bronner thought it would be, and is correct that it is great for 3 and 4-year-olds. However, my high school student intern loves it. She immediately took to it and immediately went, oh, this is how it's like CodeQuest, and was making those connections.
And it was really cool to use it just as a reinforcer. Again, like
Absolutely.
with training on it, I had it there, but I was like, wow, this really works well together. And it changes up from, well, we've got CodeJumper, we've got Code and Go Mouse. And with Code and Go Mouse, you can really change up the specs. I mean, like the activities, so you can interchange the activities with students. And anyway, they really did enjoy it.
And what a fun way to get your student up and moving. And maybe you invite a lucky classmate to come do the dancing machine and have it go. It can be a small circle, but it can be a 3-person circle. And I think that would really get the concept across as well.
And with trainings, I love to do this with groups of adults. It's hilarious to see different age adults doing various dance moves. Awesome.
Yes, Jeff, let's do it.
So in the last day, we set up this idea of sequencing, but we also continue an idea of threads, that in programming, things can run simultaneously or at the same time. And with CodeJumper, you can run various sound sets at the same time and create a different layer of sound. So we started with, again, like a string, and we changed a few things. Then we started with a very long string, and now we're moving to 2 more complex ideas on top of each other. And there's no better unplugged activity that I could think of than We Will Code You. And you'll understand the idea when the video starts, of splitting the song We Will Rock You into this idea of threads. And it's great to see the students' frustration because they want to play it all and they can't. So anyway, we'll continue on through the concepts that are covered in this video. So threads is, and we kind of review here that they cover threads. We ask them what is We Will Rock You in the terms of computer science. And you know, I really should have set this up as a poll question. What does the algorithm We Will Rock You do? And I love the answer to that question. And once we're done with the video, you ponder on it, maybe put it in the chat. What does the algorithm We Will Rock You do? But we use this to cover and review. And I've got to stress this, CodeJumper the curriculum encourages students to use a computer journal. And yes, students sometimes loathe taking notes, especially in this grade, but I thought it was great to have them write it down, write these concepts down, and go back and reflect on it. And so here is the day 3 video. And I swear I did not pay this student to say any of this.
The CodeJumper. I liked programming it, especially the piano scale and the Beethoven's 5th Symphony. I mean, I really love music. I mean, I really love this week. I mean, I watch a show called BattleBots where people build robots and they fight each other, the robots fight each other. And I really love that show, and that's why I was super excited. I mean, my dad and I were so excited to hear about this week, and I was amazed at all the things we've done. I mean, the CodeJumper and the Code and Go Mouse, it was really fun. I mean, I love this. This is amazing.
Do this for a while, right? Yeah. How would we do this in music? It's the same notes, but we want to loop you. Oh. We want to loop your 2 different threads. Your thread is, but we want to loop it. Let's loop it 4 times. Now you guys in the back, I want you to be paying attention because you're gonna You're gonna come in a second. All right, ready? We're gonna loop 4 times. So 1, 2, 3.
Oh. I think I know what this is.
Really?
All right, all right. Well, they ran 4 times, so I don't know where the guys in the back are.
Oh no, we mercy.
All right.
Now count
4 times.
4 times.
So, what happens when one part of the program doesn't run?
Everything.
Right. And if my cool kids on the rock you side, even though they didn't say we will, your program still could have said rock you, even without them. So let's try it again. Try it again. All right. All right, hang on. Hang on. We're building this. It is so easy for everybody to sit here and go, but that's one sequence, only one. This is 4 threads with a different sequence. Are we ready? And 1, 2, 3. I love that. See if you can use. There is one second. There you go. Close. Okay. Try this one more time.
I don't even want her. She's scared.
And so I tried not to talk over it because a couple of people in the chat said they had difficulty hearing. So there at the end, I think watching the rock you algorithm, and again, in the chat, what is the We Will Rock You algorithm designed to do? Anybody pop it in and I will reply. So the activity that they were doing at the end, they were using threads and using multiple lines in CodeJumper to build a sound, basically a sound scene. I was asking them to please tell me a story in audio format. And a lot of them layered weather sounds together over animal sounds or over some of the other sounds. So it got them into this idea that programs run at the same time. I would ask them to rearrange the order. One of the things I have to stress with CodeJumper is that like these activities were done on a short time frame because I'm a trainer with the CATT program and luckily got this opportunity with these students. But these lessons you could have an hour in a week. It could be at maybe 2 hours in a month. Like there are ways to include this in a curriculum, and it doesn't have to be this long ordeal. In very much small bites. So again, the activity that they did at the end that you heard, like raindrops and birds, it was students painting an Audible picture. And that's somewhat where we left off in our CodeJumper training, but there is just a ton of other concepts that can be covered with CodeJumper. So I asked them, of course, and I kind of mentioned some of this a minute ago, like explain the threads that you used. Tell me why you used what you did, what goes in order, what's the sequence in the thread, like tell me a story based on the audio, explain to me your code. And, did it work the way you thought it would at first? If not, why? One of the things that I see that can happen is when a student makes a mistake, that sometimes an instructor will come in and immediately help them. And what I liked about CodeJumper is it was something I could sit back and watch and maybe ask a question or two, but really refrain from interacting, like having to guide part of the learning process with a STEM device, or in CodeJumper in particular, is making those mistakes and learning, all right, this is not what I need to do. What do I need to do to get here? Because that's programming logic. I asked them again what parameters are in the program. What were the parameters in the program? They mentioned sound and duration. And again, we reiterate, what is a parameter? And again, computer science, it's a value that's given as an instruction or command that you can change up or down. It's a sound set, or the pitch, or maybe the explosion, or if it's a slow explosion or a long one. And the newest parameter that they used, in this case, it was a pause pod. I asked them to take some part of your thread and include the pause pod and delay an interaction to make it last longer. So with CodeJumper, and as you progress through the curriculum, you gradually add these things in. So it's easily, it can be a very lengthy program if you use it, in small doses, or it can be reiterated with students in large doses. So it's just kind of interesting how you can slowly integrate each pod into your instruction. And again, we asked the students what a sound set is, and just to confirm that they understand the concept that it's these files that we're pulling that represent different matched sounds together.
And I think you made a really good point there, Jason, with it's a fairly flexible the way you can use this curriculum, and you can tie it into other things. Maybe your student has a goal on their IEP that they're supposed to practice writing more. So writing in Braille, typing, whatever form of writing that they are supposed to do, UL, this might be a more fun and interactive way to write down your program idea. What is the goal of your program? What are the parameters you're going to be using? Use this computer science journal instead of just saying, okay, sit down and write something. You're supposed to write something now.
And so we have a short time for review. I agree, absolutely, Leslie. I mean, it can be used in a multitude of different ways. And that's the next step, is that we're looking to see how different teachers in different professions use it differently. I know that sounds very different, but
it's a flexible device, and it's
right.
Universally designed, and sky's the limit.
And so what we went over this week, and I'm trying to speed it up here at the end, is a computer system. What we went over this week with the students was, what was a computer system? What is a sequence? What is an algorithm? What are parameters? And what is a thread? So it was 5 different concepts that we covered in effectively 4 days. So they had, and the thing that I loved is day 5 was a pizza party, right? Like, because you can't expect this from them and not feed them. So I brought them pizza, and I had a number of students, and I'm genuinely saying this, that came up and said, well, where's the CodeJumper? And I'm like, well, we're doing pizza party today. And they were like, man, I thought you were going to bring back the CodeJumper. So they were kind of upset that day 5 I didn't have it. So I felt a little terrible. Anyway. And day 4, we've already covered through that. So there are so many other lessons in CodeJumper. I covered what we actually were able to cover, the 5 different topics. But from lesson 5 all the way on through lesson, I believe it's 19 down here, you have debugging, loops and sequences, decomposition, constant, selection and conditionals, selection and random, variables, counters, nested loops, networks, topologies, protocols, and binary numbers. So there's, if coding intimidates you, and I'm thinking about that poll question, you can take this as slow as you need to, and there are guided instructions. I mean, wouldn't you agree, Leslie, that you don't have to tackle all 19 lessons? I, as the trainer, have not tackled all 19. I'm looking forward to those advanced lessons, but at first people have to get kind of their feet wet with it, and students too, and teachers. But the first half is is great. Oh, here's a great, fantastic group shot. And I've got to just mention this because I love students and they make me chuckle, but they all were given t-shirts at the end. They didn't know this as I'm getting the footage together. But we gave them t-shirts and I said, all right, we're going to take a group photo, put on your t-shirts. And they also got fanny packs. Well, the majority of them put on the t-shirt and the fanny pack, which I don't think is super cool, but evidently fanny packs are back. So most of the students in the picture absolutely chose to wear a fanny pack with their t-shirts, but it's a lot of happy kids.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, and just to round this out, sorry if Jaws wants to talk to me. I have a sneak peek that we being APH, are going to release soon what we're calling CJ puzzles. And it's new ways of using CodeJumper. They're kind of your pick your own mystery. So you have a story. CJ is this cute little blue foxy alien guy, and he's interested in learning about Earth. So there's some double dipping of learning about the water cycle. So you program the water cycle in a loop on CodeJumper. And there's a treasure map. So you figure out the riddles, and that's how many times you turn the dial, and then you get a secret surprise at the end. Really excited about them. I've just been playing with them. So those should be coming out soon. And those might take another layer of the scariness out, because cute little blue foxy guy. And I think we have one more poll question, Jeff.
Actually, we're at the top of the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and we're going to pause the recording.